could you slap me? That wristwatch, who gave it to you? My boyfriend gave it to me. Liar! You're a thief! No, I'm not. Then where did you get that watch? That is our family wristwatch.
She probably stole this.
Then tell everyone.
The slap came so suddenly that Liana didn't even understand what had happened. 1 second she was standing quietly among hundreds of wealthy guests, holding a glass of water she had not touched. The next, her head had turned to the side, her ear was ringing, and her cheek was burning like fire. The whole ballroom went silent. 300 people turned to look at her at once. Liana's hand went slowly to her face. Her eyes filled with tears before she even understood why. She was not crying. She was simply too shocked to stop the water from coming. The elegant Korean woman standing in front of her was shaking with anger. She lifted one finger and pointed at Liana's wrist. "Where did you get that watch?" Liana looked down. The watch. A beautiful silver timepiece with a soft cream face. The one she had worn every single day for 2 weeks. The one she checked at bus stops just to hear it tick. She looked back at the woman, completely confused. "My boyfriend gave it to me," she said. She did not shout it. She said it plainly, the way you say a true thing, expecting it to be enough. It was not enough. Something changed in the older woman's face. It went white, then red. Her mouth trembled. "Your boyfriend?" "Yes." The woman stepped closer and took Liana's hand, turning it toward the light. She stared at the little silver watch, as though she were looking at a ghost, because she knew that watch. She had held it in her own hands. She had watched a man she loved wind it every morning at the breakfast table for 22 years. She had wrapped it in silk herself and locked it away where no stranger would ever touch it again. And now, it was sitting on the wrist of a young woman she had never seen before in her life. "You expect me to believe that?" "Ma'am, please. I think there has been a mistake." "There has been no mistake." Her voice rose so that the balcony could hear it. "That watch belongs to my family." The whispering started at the front of the room and spread backward like water finding a crack. Liana's stomach dropped through the floor. "Please, just listen to me for 1 second. Do you know what it is worth?" "I do," Liana said. "I know exactly what it's worth." It was the worst possible answer, and she heard it the moment it left her mouth. Somebody near the pillars laughed. One short, ugly laugh, quickly covered. "She knows what it's worth," a woman repeated, delighted, to the man beside her. "Of course she knows. Look at her. That's why she came. Gold digger," a voice said, clearly, into the silence. Liana turned her head toward the voice and could not even find it. That was the worst part. There was no single face to look at. It was all of them and none of them. 300 well-dressed strangers holding glasses, watching her the way people watch something unpleasant happening safely on the other side of a window. "I have a job," she said. Her voice cracked in the middle of it, and she hated that. "I work. I have worked in this city for 4 years. I have never taken anything from anybody in my life. Then how does a girl like you come to be wearing a watch like that? I told you, it was given to me." "Given?" The woman's laugh had no humor in it at all. "Yes, somebody always gives it to them." "Ma'am, if you would just let me explain, I can tell you exactly. Take it off. Please. Take it off. Now." Liana's fingers went to the strap. They were shaking so badly that she could not find the clasp. She tried 3 times. Her nail slipped. The tears finally came over the edge and ran down her burning cheek, and she wiped them away with the back of her hand. And somewhere behind her, a woman murmured, "Oh, now the crying." A man in a gray suit stepped forward, not to help her, only to look closer. He leaned toward her wrist, the way a person leans toward a museum case. Liana pulled her arm back against her chest, and the movement made her look guilty, and she watched that thought land on 20 faces at exactly the same moment. "Security," the woman said, without turning around. 2 men in black started walking toward the entrance, and Liana stopped fighting with the clasp. She stood very still in the middle of that gold room, with her ear still ringing, and hundreds of people staring at her, and she thought one clear thought. Do not shout. Do not beg. Do not give them anything else to talk about. She lifted her chin. Her voice came out shaking, but it came out. "I am not a thief," she said, "and I can prove it. All I need is one phone call." "Then make it," the woman said coldly. "Call this boyfriend of yours. Let all of us hear him." Liana reached into her small bag with trembling hands and pulled out her phone. She found the name, and she pressed call. Somewhere on the other side of the city, in the back of a black car stuck in traffic, a phone began to ring. "Welcome to Lou Stories. Now buckle up." But to understand how Liana ended up standing in that ballroom with a burning cheek and a silver watch on her wrist, we have to go back 7 months, to a rainy Tuesday, when she had never even heard the name Moon Tae-jun. Liana was 26 years old. She had been living in Seoul for 4 years, and she worked in a small watch and clock repair shop in a narrow street behind Yuljiro. The shop was called Han Time. It was tiny. It smelled like oil and old wood. The front window was crowded with clocks that all ticked at slightly different speeds, so the whole place sounded like rain falling on a tin roof. The owner was a man named Mr. Han. He was 71. His knees were bad, and 2 years earlier, his hands had started to shake. That was why he had hired Liana. She had walked into his shop as a customer, carrying a cheap wristwatch her father had given her before he died. 3 shops had told her it was not worth fixing. Mr. Han looked at it, then looked at her, and asked why she cared so much about a watch that cost almost nothing. "Because he wore it every day for 19 years, she said. Mr. Han fixed it right there in front of her. Then he watched the way she leaned over the counter, the way her eyes followed his tools, the way she asked the name of every small piece. "You have patient eyes," he said. "Do you want a job?" That was 4 years ago. Now Liana could open a watch, clean it, replace a spring, and close it again, without leaving a single fingerprint on the glass. Mr. Han said she had better hands than any student he had ever trained. She worked 6 days a week. On Sundays, she taught a beginner English class at a community center for 8,001 an hour, and she sent money home to her mother every single month. In a small notebook under her bed, she kept a list of numbers: rent, food, transport, savings. At the bottom of the last page, she had written one line: "My own shop, someday." That was Liana's dream. Not a rich husband, not a big apartment, a small shop with her name on the window and a bell over the door. She shared a 2-room apartment with her best friend Naomi, who worked at a hotel front desk and had opinions about everything. "You are 26, Naomi said one morning, eating rice, standing up because she was late. "You spend your entire life in a room full of old clocks. Do you know what that means? Time is passing and you are literally watching it." "That is very poetic," Liana said. "You should put it on a card." "I am serious. When did you last go on a date?" Liana pretended to think very hard. 2019. Naomi pointed her spoon at her. "That is not funny. That is tragic." Liana laughed and pushed her out the door. That was Liana's life. Simple, small, hers. And that Tuesday, it was raining. She was carrying a wall clock down the narrow alley behind the shop. It was old, almost as tall as her chest, and it belonged to a bakery 2 streets away. It was heavy. The rain was making the box slippery, and she could not see properly over the top of it. So she did not see the man walking toward her. She turned the corner, her shoe slid on the wet stone, and the clock left her arms. It should have hit the ground and broken into 100 pieces. It didn't. A pair of hands caught it. 2 long arms wrapped around the box and pulled it upright, and Liana found herself standing very close to a tall man in a black coat, both of them holding the same clock, rain running down both their faces. He looked at her calmly. She was not calm. "Why were you standing in the middle of the alley?" she said. He raised one eyebrow. "I was walking." "You were standing." "I was walking," he repeated, "and then a clock came flying at my head, so I stopped." Liana blinked the rain out of her eyes. He had a very steady face, sharp jaw, broad shoulders, the kind of stillness that made everything around him seem louder. His coat probably cost more than her rent, but she was too annoyed to notice. Give it here, she said. It's heavy. I know it's heavy. I carried it. Badly, he said. Liana stared at him. Excuse me? For 1 second, something moved at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. Not quite. Where is it going? He asked. Han time, behind the noodle place. He started walking, carrying her clock, without waiting for permission. Hey, Liana said, hurrying after him. Sir, I did not ask for help. I know. I can carry it. I know that too. She walked beside him in the rain with her arms folded, deeply irritated, and completely unaware that this man had not carried anything heavier than a phone in 15 years, because there had always been somebody paid to do it for him. At the shop door, he set the clock down gently and straightened his coat. Thank you, Liana said, because her mother had raised her properly, even when she was annoyed. He nodded once and turned to go. Then he stopped. He was looking at the window full of clocks, all of them ticking at slightly different speeds. You repair these? He asked. We do. Old ones? Older the better, Liana said. New ones are boring. Anybody can fix new ones. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he walked away into the rain, and Liana went inside, dried her hair with a towel, and forgot about him completely. He came back 9 days later. She was at the workbench with a loop in her eye when the bell above the door rang. She looked up, and there he was, in a gray suit this time, with rain on his shoulders again, as though the weather followed him around. You? She said. Me, he agreed. He set a small box on the counter and opened it. Inside was a wristwatch, silver, very old. The face was soft white, almost the color of cream, and there were tiny engraved lines around the edge, so fine they only appeared when the light moved. Liana forgot to be polite. She picked it up. Oh, she said quietly. She turned it over. On the back were 2 Korean characters, worn almost smooth by decades of skin. This is handmade. Yes. 1950s? He paused. 1958. It isn't running. No. Do you wind it? I haven't worn it in 11 years. Liana looked up at him then, properly, and something in his face made her stop asking questions. It will take a week, she said. Maybe 2. Some of these parts don't exist anymore. I may have to make one. You can make one? I can try, she said. Mr. Han can. I watch and pretend I'm helping. That almost smile again. How much? He asked. Liana turned to the price list taped beside the register. Full service, hand-wound, vintage, 140,000 won, plus parts. He looked at her. She looked back. Is that too expensive? There was a strange pause. No, he said, that's fine. What Liana did not know was that 3 years earlier a workshop in Switzerland had offered to restore that same watch for the equivalent of 19 million won, and he had said no, because he did not like the way the man had spoken about his grandfather. Name? She asked, opening the repair book. Moon. First name, Tae-jun. She wrote it down. Moon Tae-jun. Silver hand-wound, 1958. No urgency. Phone number? He gave it. She wrote that too. Come back next Friday, she said, and went straight back to her bench, and did not look up when he left. She had no idea that she had just written the private number of one of the richest men in the country into a 90-cent notebook. He came back that Friday. The watch was ticking. She had cleaned every part by hand, and Mr. Han had cut a new mainspring on the little lathe at the back, complaining the entire time. Tae-jun held the watch to his ear for a long moment. Liana watched his face and saw something she had not expected. Not satisfaction. Something quieter and heavier. His jaw moved once. Are you okay? She asked, before she could stop herself. He put the watch down. It sounds the same, he said. As what? As it did when I was a child. He paid in cash. He thanked Mr. Han, and then, at the door, he stopped again. There is a place near here, he said. They make hotteokuk with black sesame. Have you had it? Liana narrowed her eyes. Are you asking me out? Tae-jun considered this very seriously. I am asking you about Hatakuk. That is not an answer. It is a very safe answer, he said. And that was how Liana ended up standing at a street stall at 8 in the evening, holding hot sweetbread in a paper cup, arguing with a stranger about whether black sesame was better than cinnamon. Cinnamon is for tourists, she said. I am Korean. You have tourist taste. He laughed. It was short and surprised, like a sound that had escaped without permission, and two people walking past turned to look at him. They walked. They talked about nothing important. She told him about the bakery clock, and about the man who had cried when she fixed his father's alarm clock. He told her almost nothing about himself, and she noticed, but she did not push. What do you do? She asked finally. I run my family's company. What does it do? Many things. That is the vaguest answer any human being has ever given. It is an accurate answer, he said. She shrugged. Fine. Keep your secrets. He looked at her sideways. Most people, the moment they sensed money, leaned in. They asked which company. They asked the name. Their voices changed. Hers didn't. They met again the next week, then the week after that. He started coming to the shop with excuses. A clock at his office that ran 2 minutes slow, a pocket watch belonging to a man he did not name. Once he brought nothing at all and simply stood at the counter, and Mr. Han looked between the two of them, went to the back room, and stayed there for 45 minutes, whistling. They walked along the Cheonggyecheon stream at night. They took a ferry on the Han River, and Liana gripped the rail with both hands and admitted she could not swim. And Tae-jun stood behind her for the entire trip without saying one word about it. He learned things about her slowly. That she hated coffee and loved terrible sweet milk tea. That she had 2 younger brothers. That her father had been a mechanic, and that she had learned to love machines by sitting on a stool beside him, with a torch in her hand, holding the light steady for him. He is the reason for the clocks, Tae-jun said. He is the reason for everything, Liana said. And she learned things about him, very slowly, like pulling small stones out of a wall. That he had been sent to boarding school in England at 9 years old. That he had eaten his 10th birthday dinner alone in a dormitory because his father's meeting ran long. That he had been trained since childhood to keep his face still. Why? She asked. Because a face that shows something can be used. Liana turned to him on that bench by the river. That is the saddest thing I have ever heard. He did not answer. 3 months in, Naomi came home with her phone in her hand and a strange look on her face. Liana. Your clock man. He is not my clock man. Look at this. She held out the phone. A news article. A man in a dark suit at a press conference. 4 microphones in front of him. The words Moon Group on the wall behind him. Liana's stomach went cold. That is him, Naomi said. Moon Tae-jun. He is not a manager, Liana. He is Moon Group. Hotels, shipping, half of Yoyuido. I know what Moon Group is, Liana said quietly. Everyone in the country knew what Moon Group was. She did not sleep that night. The next evening she met him at their usual place near the stream. She did not sit down. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at her carefully. Would it have changed anything? That is not the point. It is exactly the point. No. Her voice shook. The point is that I have been sitting here for 3 months, telling you about my rent, and my brother's school fees, and my broken heater, like a fool, and you let me. I was listening to you, he said, not letting you. Do you know how this makes me look? You look, he said, like the only person in this country who has ever told me I have tourist taste. Liana pressed both hands to her face. Tae-jun. He stood up. He did not touch her. When people learn who I am, they change, he said. Their voices change first, then their faces, then everything they say to me becomes something they want. I have watched it happen 1,000 times since I was a child, and it happens in under 3 seconds. He paused. With you it never happened, so I said nothing, because I wanted to know how long it would last. His jaw tightened. That was selfish. I'm sorry. Liana stared at the ground for a long moment. I am not going to become different, she said. Not now, not later. I know. And I don't want anything from you. I know that too, he said. That is the reason I am standing here. She looked up at him. Say something normal, she said. Right now. Anything, something a normal man would say to a woman. Tae-jun thought about it. Your milk tea is disgusting, he said. And I bought you one anyway. He held it out. Liana laughed with tears still in her eyes and took it. That was the night everything changed. They became a couple 3 weeks later, on a rooftop in Seoul that belonged to one of his buildings, sitting on a concrete ledge with the whole city glittering below them like a spilled box of jewels. I want to ask you something, he said. Ask. I want us to keep this private for a while. Liana turned to face him. Private from who? My family, the press, everyone. She was quiet for a second. Are you ashamed of me? He turned to her so fast that she almost laughed. No. His voice went low and hard. Never think that. Not for 1 second. Then why? Because the moment my family knows, you stop being Liana, he said. You become a subject. My mother will hire people to look into you. My aunts will discuss you at dinner, as if you are not in the room. My father will ask what you want. Photographers will follow you to work. And all of that will happen before you and I have even decided what we are. He looked out at the city. I want to know you first, properly, without 100 people standing between us. Liana thought about it for a long time. Okay, she said finally, but not for your reasons. Then for what reason? Because when your mother finally meets me, I want to be able to look her in the eye and say, I did not come for your money. She lifted her chin. I want to have earned that sentence. Tae-jun looked at her the way a man looks at something he had stopped expecting from life. Then that is what we will do, he said. The next 4 months were the happiest of Liana's life. They were also completely invisible. He never took her anywhere with cameras. Instead, he took her to a noodle shop in Mangwon, run by an old woman who had known his grandfather, who called him boy, and hit his arm with a ladle when he did not finish his broth. He took her to a bookshop that opened at midnight. He took her to a fish market at 5 in the morning, where she wore a hoodie and rubber boots and ate raw scallops standing up, and he laughed so hard at her face that a fish seller told him to be quiet. He learned that she liked orange sweets, the cheap ones in the yellow wrapper. He started keeping a bowl of them in his car. His driver once opened the door for a visiting chairman, who reached into that bowl, ate one, and asked in great confusion why the head of Moon Group was eating children's candy. Once, she mentioned in passing that she had never seen the ocean in winter. 2 weeks later, he drove her 4 hours to Gangneung at night without telling her where they were going, and they stood on an empty beach in the freezing dark, listening to the water. You are insane, Liana said, teeth chattering. You said you wanted to see it. I said it once. You said it once, he agreed. She looked at him then. This quiet, controlled man who never showed his face to anybody, standing on a cold beach at midnight because she had said one sentence in a noodle shop. Tae-jun. I think I'm in love with you. He did not answer immediately. He reached over and pulled her scarf up over her nose because she was shivering. Then he said, I have been in love with you since the alley. You were rude to me in the alley. Yes, he said. That is how I knew. Quick pause. If this story has you hooked, tap like and drop your thoughts below. Now, back to the story. Liana's birthday was on the 14th of March. She did not tell him. She did not tell anybody, actually, except Naomi, and only because Naomi had seen her passport. But Tae-jun had asked her once, months earlier, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely, and she had answered without thinking. He remembered. She arrived at the shop that morning and found Mr. Han grinning like a criminal. You are not working today, he announced. What? Closed. Family emergency. You have no family. Then it is a very serious emergency, Mr. Han said, and pushed her out of her own workplace. Tae-jun was waiting outside in a plain black car with no driver. He drove her out of the city to a small house near a river, 1-story, old wood, with a garden that clearly had not been touched in years. "Whose house is this?" she asked. "My grandfather's." Inside, there was no staff, no chef, just a low table set for two, and a very unimpressive cake sitting in the middle of it, leaning slightly to the left. Liana stared at it. "Did you buy this?" "No, Tae-jun. I made it," he said, with the dignity of a man who commands a boardroom of 200 people. Liana put a hand over her mouth. "It is broken. It is structurally challenged. It is falling. It is leaning," he corrected, deliberately. "It is a design choice." She laughed until she had to sit down on the floor. They ate the crooked cake with their hands. He had cooked the rest of the food too, badly, following a video on his phone. The soup was too salty, and the fish was slightly burnt, and it was the best meal Liana had ever eaten in her life. Afterward, they sat on the wooden step outside, watching the river turn silver in the evening light. "I have something for you," he said. He took a small box out of his coat pocket and put it in her hands. Liana opened it and went completely still. Inside was the silver watch, the one from 1958, the one she had opened with her own hands, cleaned with her own brushes, listened to through her own lupe. "No," she said. "Liana." "No, Tae-jun." She was already shaking her head. "I know what this is. I know what it's worth. I held it. I know what those engravings are. This isn't a gift. This is... Look at me." She looked up. He was completely calm. "It sat in a drawer for 11 years, he said. "Nobody wound it. Nobody wore it. It was dead metal in a dark box until a woman in a shop behind a noodle place put her hands on it and made it live again." Liana's eyes were burning. "Who did it belong to?" she whispered. Tae-jun was quiet for a moment. "Someone in my family," he said. "It was made for him by hand. He wore it every day of his life. When I was small, I used to fall asleep listening to it, because he would hold me and I could hear it ticking against my ear." His voice did not shake, but his hand did, very slightly. "When he died, it stopped. And nobody in my family could bring themselves to fix it, so they locked it away." Liana pressed her fingers to her mouth. "Then you fixed it," Tae-jun said. "You didn't know whose it was. You didn't know what it was worth. You just thought it was beautiful, and you gave it back its life." He took the watch out of the box and fastened it around her wrist himself. It was too big for her. He tightened the strap 2 notches. "There is nobody alive," he said, "who deserves to wear it more than you," Liana cried. She could not help it. She put her face against his shoulder and cried while the river went dark. "Thank you," she said. "Happy birthday." She wore it every single day after that. Not because it was expensive, because when a room went quiet, she could hear it ticking, and it sounded like him. She never asked exactly who it had belonged to. She thought he would tell her when he was ready. She did not know that on the other side of the city, there was a woman who had locked that watch into a safe with her own hands 11 years earlier, and had not opened that safe since. 12 days later, Tae-jun called her at work. "There is a family event on Saturday," he said. "My father's foundation. 300 people. My parents will be there." Liana put down her screwdriver. "Okay," she said slowly. "I want you to come." Silence. "Liana? As what?" "As the woman I am going to marry. Eventually, if she will have me," Tae-jun said, in the same flat voice he used to order coffee. "But on Saturday, as my girlfriend, that is enough for one night." Liana sat down on her stool very suddenly. "Do your parents know?" "Not yet. Tae-jun, I am going to tell them myself, in front of everyone. I am done keeping you in the dark part of my life." Her heart was slamming. "They will hate me. They don't know you. That is exactly why they will hate me." "Then they will learn," he said. "I am not asking their permission. I am introducing my girlfriend. Liana laughed shakily. You say that like it's a business meeting. It is worse, he said. There will be dancing. She laughed properly then, and he heard it, and his voice softened. Liana. Yes? You have nothing to be afraid of. I will be there. From the moment you walk in, I will be standing beside you. Nobody will say one word to you that I do not hear. She held the phone with both hands. Promise? I promise. Saturday came. Naomi did her hair for 3 hours and cried twice. Liana wore a simple deep green dress, borrowed earrings, and the silver watch. Should I take the watch off? She asked at the door. It doesn't really match. Naomi adjusted it on her wrist. Wear it. It's his. It will keep you calm. At 6:50, Liana's phone rang. I am going to be late, Tae-jun said, and she could hear the tightness in his voice. There is a problem with the port contract. 2 hours, maybe less. Liana's stomach dropped. Then I'll wait outside. No, it's freezing. Go in. My driver will take you. A pause. Liana, I'm sorry. It's fine, she lied. Do not let anyone bother you. I will be there. I know. I mean it. 90 minutes. She hung up, stood in the cold for a moment, and then walked in alone. The ballroom was enormous. Gold light, glass, an orchestra playing somewhere she could not see. 300 people who all seemed to know each other. Liana took a glass of water from a waiter and stood near the entrance, because standing near the entrance meant she could see the door, and the door meant Tae-jun. She checked the watch. 7:34. She stayed polite when a group of women looked at her and stopped talking. She smiled at an older man, who asked which company she was with, and lost interest the second she said she was a guest. She heard a woman behind her say, in Korean, who invited her? Is she with the entertainment? Liana understood Korean perfectly. She kept her face still. She did not turn around. She looked at the door and thought, 90 minutes. She checked the watch again. 7:41. And that was when a woman in pale gray stopped walking in the middle of the room. Lee Hye-won was 59 years old, and she had a very good eye for detail. She had noticed the young woman by the entrance almost immediately, because she did not recognize her, and she recognized everybody. She had actually been walking over to greet her politely. Then she saw the wrist. She saw the silver, the shape of the case, the soft cream face, and the tiny engraved lines that only appeared when the light moved. And everything inside Lee Hye-won's chest turned to ice, because she knew that watch. She had watched her father-in-law wind it every morning for 22 years. She had held it in her hands the day he died. She had cleaned it with a cloth, wrapped it in silk, and locked it in the family safe herself, promising that no stranger would ever touch it again. 11 years earlier, in the same month that he died, their country house had been emptied by 2 men who had worked for the family for 6 years. Necklaces, her mother's jade, a box of her wedding jewelry. Nothing was ever recovered. The police shrugged, and Hye-won had never fully trusted a new face since. Now she was looking at a young woman she had never seen before in her life, standing at the edge of her husband's event, wearing her dead father-in-law's watch. And every reasonable thought left her head. You already know what happened next. The slap, the burning cheek, the whispering, the word gold digger, thrown into the silence by a voice nobody would ever admit to owning. And then the phone call. Liana pressed the name on her screen with a shaking hand, while 300 people watched. It rang once. Lee Hye-won folded her arms. Well, it rang twice. It rang 3 times. He isn't answering, somebody said helpfully, and a soft ripple of laughter went around the room. Liana's eyes closed, because he was in a car, because he was in a meeting, because in the entire 7 months she had known him, Moon Tae-jun had never once let a phone interrupt him when he was working. Please, she thought, please, just this once. The call ended. The room made a sound, not laughter exactly, something worse. The sound of 300 people all deciding the same thing at the same time. Enough, Lee Hye-won said. Take the watch off her. A security man reached for Liana's arm, and her phone rang in her hand. She got it to her ear before the second ring. Liana, his voice. Low, immediate, already alert. What's wrong? She could not speak. She opened her mouth and no sound came out at all, and the tears finally broke over the edge and ran down her burning cheek. And 300 people watched a young woman stand in the middle of a ballroom and silently fall apart. Liana, sharper now. Where are you? I'm here, she whispered. I'm at the event. What happened? Your mother, she said. There was a pause of exactly 1 second on the other end of the line. Then, distantly, she heard a car door open into traffic. The music stopped 4 minutes later. Not because anybody told the orchestra to stop, but because the conductor turned his head and saw who had just walked into the room. Moon Tae-jun was still in his coat. He had left the car in the road and run the last 2 blocks. He was not looking at his mother. He was looking at the red mark on Liana's face. Nobody in that room had ever seen his expression like that before. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was the stillness of something that has just been broken very badly on the inside. Tae-jun, his mother said, confused. This woman is wearing your grandfather's. He walked straight past her. He went to Liana. He took her face in both hands, gently, and turned her cheek toward the light. Are you hurt? Liana's whole body was shaking. Tae-jun, look at me. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she whispered. You are not fine, he said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't here. 300 people watched the head of Moon Group wipe a tear off a stranger's face with his thumb. Then he turned around, keeping one hand wrapped around hers, and he spoke quietly, in a voice that reached every corner of that silent room. This is Liana, he said. She is my girlfriend. We have been together for 7 months. Nothing moved. His mother's face went white. His father, standing near the stage, set down his glass so hard that it cracked. And the watch, Tae-jun said, was not stolen. He looked at his mother. I gave it to her. 2 weeks ago, on her birthday, I put it on her wrist myself. Somebody in the crowd made a small sound. I took it out of the safe in Father's study, he went on. I gave it to the only person I have ever met who knew what it was without being told what it cost. She repaired that watch with her own hands 11 months ago in a small shop behind a noodle place for 140,000 won. She did not know it belonged to us. She did not know who I was. He paused. She fixed grandfather's watch, he said, and tonight you slapped her for wearing it. The silence was total. Lee Hai-won stood in the middle of it, looking at the young woman's cheek, and at her son's face, and at the watch. Tae-jun, I didn't. Don't, he said. Not to me. Not tonight. He turned to Liana. Do you want to leave? Liana looked around the room, at the security men who had stopped walking, at the woman with the champagne glass who was now studying the floor very carefully, at 300 faces that had all rearranged themselves in the last 90 seconds. Yes, she said. Then we leave. He took off his coat, put it around her shoulders, and they walked out together straight through the middle of the crowd, and not one person said a word. The next 3 days were not a happy ending. They were a war. The family gathered on Sunday afternoon at the house. Tae-jun's father, Moon Sang-woo, his mother, his aunt, and his cousin Bae So-ra, who had been the woman with the champagne glass, and who now would not look anybody in the eye. Liana was there because she had insisted on being there. How long, his father asked. 7 months. Why did we not know? Because I know this house, Tae-jun said. I wanted her to have a life before you got hold of it. His father's mouth tightened. That is not fair. Neither was last night. His mother had not spoken once. She sat very straight with her hands in her lap. His aunt turned to Liana. Do you understand what this family is? I am beginning to. There will be photographers. There already are photographs. Do you know what they are saying about you online right now? I haven't looked. You should look. No, Tae-jun said. She should not. Does she know? the aunt said, that if she stays with you, she will never go to a supermarket again without somebody taking her picture. I know, Liana said. Do you love him? His father said suddenly. Or do you love this? He gestured at the room, the house, everything. Liana looked at him. Sir, she said, 11 months ago your son walked into my shop, and I charged him 140,000 won, and he paid it in cash without arguing. Do you know what I thought? I thought, that man has no idea what things cost. She smiled a little, sadly. He baked me a birthday cake and it fell over. That is the man I love. If you took all of this away tomorrow, he would still be that man. I honestly don't know what I would do with the rest of it. The room went quiet. Then Liana stood up. But I want to say something else, and then I would like to go home. Her voice was steady, but everyone could see her hands. Last night I was hit in the face, in front of 300 people, she said. I was called a thief. Somebody called me a gold digger, and people laughed. Security walked toward me. Bae Sora shut her eyes. I have worked in this city for 4 years. I have paid my rent and my taxes, and I have never taken one thing from anybody. And in 60 seconds, in that room, I became a criminal because of the way I look and a watch on my wrist. She looked directly at Tae-jun's mother. You didn't ask me who I was. You didn't call your son. You looked at me, and you decided. Lee Hae-won did not lift her head. I love him, Liana said, and her voice finally cracked. But I am not going to spend the rest of my life fighting strangers at parties to prove I belong. So I need to think, and nobody in this room gets to rush me. She left. Tae-jun found her that night on the rooftop in Seongsu, sitting on the concrete ledge in a jumper and jeans with the whole city glittering below her. He sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. I think you should let me go, she said finally. No. Tae-jun, listen to me. You will fight your mother for the rest of her life because of me. You will lose your family. That is my decision. And what about mine? She turned to him, tears running freely now. Do you know what it is like to have hundreds of people decide who you are before you open your mouth? I can't live like that every week. And I can't watch you destroy your family arguing about it. Tae-jun took her hands. Then hear me clearly, he said, so you never have to ask again. He waited until she looked at him. I am not standing here because I feel guilty. Guilt would have made me apologize and send you flowers and quietly let you go, because that would be easier for everyone, especially me. He held her hands tighter. I am standing here because for 7 months you have been the only place in my entire life where I am allowed to be a person. You laughed at me in an alley. You told me my taste was bad. You handed me a bill for my grandfather's watch. His voice dropped. I did not choose you last night, Liana. I chose you 11 months ago. Last night I simply said it out loud. And if my family cannot accept that, then that is a loss I will carry. But I am not putting it down at your feet. Liana put her forehead against his shoulder and cried until there was nothing left. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay. Lee Hae-won came to the shop 9 days later. She came alone, without a driver, and stood outside the window looking at the clocks for almost 10 minutes before she came in. Mr. Han took one look at her, announced, I am going to buy onions, and left. Liana kept her hands on the bench. Sit down, ma'am. Hae-won sat on the customer stool, and in that tiny shop full of ticking, she suddenly looked very small. I have written this 11 times, she said. Then say the 12th one. Hae-won's mouth trembled. My father-in-law raised me more than my own father did, she said. When I married into that family, I was 23 and terrified. Everyone treated me like an outsider who had come for the money. He was the only person who spoke to me like a human being. She looked down at her hands. He wound that watch every morning at the breakfast table. Every morning, for 22 years. When he died, I put it in the safe myself. It was the only thing of his I could not bear to look at. She took a shaking breath. 11 years ago, we were robbed by people we trusted completely. I have not trusted a new face since. That is my fault, not yours. But when I saw that watch on your wrist, she stopped. I did not think. I felt, and I raised my hand to a young woman who had done nothing except stand by a door and wait for my son. She finally looked up. "There is no excuse," she said. "I humiliated you in front of 300 people. I am ashamed of myself. I am sorrier than I have ever been about anything in my life." Liana did not answer for a long time. "Thank you for saying that," she said at last. "But I need you to understand something. Please." "That night, I did not go home and cry about a slap," Liana said. "A slap heals in 2 days. What I took home is that 300 people watched, and not one of them said wait. Not one person in that room thought there might be another explanation. They looked at me, and they were certain." Haiwan's eyes filled. "I have felt that before in smaller ways," Liana said quietly. "In taxis, in shops, on the subway. But never like that. Never that loud." "I know. You don't," Liana said gently. "But I believe you want to." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I am not going to tell you it's fine. It is not fine, and I am not going to pretend that night never happened. But I am willing to sit in a room with you again. That is what I can give you today." Lee Haiwan bowed her head so low that a tear fell on her own knee. "That is more than I deserve," she said. Then, quietly, she asked, "May I see it? The watch. Not to take it, just to see it." Liana held out her arm. Haiwan looked at it for a long moment, the soft cream face, the tiny engraved lines, ticking away on a young woman's wrist in a shop that smelled of oil and old wood. "He would have liked you," she said. "He hated all of us, but he would have liked you." Liana laughed through her tears, and Lee Haiwan laughed too, and Mr. Han came back with his onions to find 2 women crying in his shop, and turned straight around and left again. 6 weeks later, Moon Group held its spring gala. The same ballroom, the same gold light, many of the same 300 faces, including Bae So-ra, who had sent Liana a handwritten letter and had not attended a single party since. This time, Liana did not arrive alone. She walked in with her hand in Moon Tae-jun's, wearing a deep green dress, borrowed earrings, and a silver watch from 1958. The room turned to look. Of course it did. And Tae-jun stopped in the middle of the floor and did not move, and let them look for as long as they wanted. Then he walked her to the front of the room, where his parents were standing. His mother stepped forward first, in front of everybody, in front of the same guests who had watched her raise her hand 8 weeks earlier. Lee Haiwan bowed to Liana. Properly, deeply, the kind of bow a woman in her position gives to almost no one. The whispering that went around that room was a completely different sound than the last one. Then Tae-jun took the microphone off the stand, which was not on the schedule, and the organizers panicked quietly at the side of the stage. "Most of you were here in February," he said, "so you already know her name, but I don't think anybody actually introduced her." He looked back at Liana. "This is Liana. She restores old watches for a living. She is the best I have ever seen at it, and I have paid people in Geneva who are worse. In 11 months, she has never once asked me for anything, which makes her unique in this room, including my own family." A ripple of nervous laughter. "She is the woman I love," Tae-jun said. "She will be beside me at every event I attend from now on. If anybody has a problem with that, bring it to me directly, and we can discuss it during business hours." Nobody had a problem. Later, they stood on the balcony outside, away from the noise, and Liana let out a long breath. "You were showing off." Slightly. That last part was terrifying. That was the point. She leaned on the rail. The city glittered below them, the way it always did. Tae-jun took her wrist and turned it gently so the light caught the silver. "Do you know what I thought?" he said, "when I ran into that room in February and saw you standing there." "What?" "That the watch was in the right place," he said, "and I was in the wrong one." Liana's throat tightened. "I promised you I'd be there," he said, "and I wasn't. You came. Late. You came," she repeated, "and you didn't hesitate for 1 second. Do you know how few men would have crossed that room?" He looked down at her hand for a long moment. "Liana. When you are ready. Not tonight, Not this year if you don't want. I am going to ask you a question. Her heart stopped. You already know the question, he said. I might, she said. And do you know the answer? Liana lifted her wrist between them, and the little silver watch ticked quietly in the cold air. The way it had ticked against a child's ear 40 years ago. The way it had ticked in a shop behind a noodle place. The way it had ticked through a slap and a silence and 300 staring faces. Ask me, she said, and find out. Tae-jun laughed, the short, surprised laugh that nobody else in the world ever heard, and kissed her on a balcony in front of half the city. Inside, the orchestra started again, and somewhere in that crowded gold room, a woman in pale gray watched them through the glass and finally, quietly, forgave herself a little. You made it to the end, and that means you're truly part of the Lou Stories community. Thank you for your support. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be replying as always, and stay subscribed, because the next story is already waiting for you.